Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's Unseminary Podcast.
Well, hey everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. My name's Rich, the host around these parts. Super excited that you've decided to spend some time with us. We trust you. We're so glad that you've decided to trust us to spend time with you today. Today we have a real treat. We've got Dan Reiland on the phone. He's one of just a few people who've been on the podcast before that's back for a return engagement. So I'm so excited to have Dan with us. Dan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Rich, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to this conversation, and it'll be obvious why.
Nice. So Dan is the executive pastor. For people who don't know, Dan's one of those guys that doesn't need much of an introduction. Well known, executive pastor at 12 Stone Church in Atlanta, a multi-site church. But Dan, I thought what we could do is we could start with you giving us a bit of the kind of 12 Stone story. Tell us about 12 Stone.
Cool. Well, let me start with our DNA, because I think the DNA that we have identified, the culture, is one that's really who we are, more than we went away on a retreat and we came up with two clever things. So a way to sort of grab hold of us really quick is three thoughts. One is spiritual intensity, creative ideation, and leadership development. That's really who we are. Those three components of spiritual intensity, creative ideation, and leadership development. And if you want to climb in, and you can't hardly be around us very long, or you're going to see those things, feel those things, hear those things. People will come in and tease us and razz us that you can't be on 12 Stone for 4 minutes without hearing somebody talk about prayer or leadership development.
Right.
Another three things you'll hear a lot are the more visionary words of how we translate that a bit is lost, least, and leadership. We're about the lost. We'll do anything to reach the lost. We're about the least. We want to give ourselves away and serve. And we're about leadership. We truly have passion for the next gen and to raise up leaders. So just for another little nugget, and then we'll go on to another question. But 12 Stone's 27 years old.
Nice.
I know. And although we feel like we were rebirthed with a new name and a new everything about 8 years ago, some pretty God-given kind of growth, but that's not how it started. In the early days, it was a rougher, slower go. It took 7 years for the church to get to 200 people.
Wow.
And then it took 7 more years for the church to get to 1,500 people. So it was 14 years in before some things really began to grab hold and take off and go forward. So this is not a splash in the pan deal. It's a layer by layer by layer for a long time. Got to give major props to the senior pastor, Kevin Myers, who is the founding pastor. 27 years, godly man. He's stuck it out the whole way.
Well, I think that's a really good thing to point out. I just want to, underline what you said there. I think particularly and you'll see where the conversation goes. I think it might be one of those things where people would say like, wow, this is like overnight success, kind of like crazy explosive thing. It's been 27 years of, faithfulness of a leadership team. Kevin, obviously at the helm of that, that has brought your church to the place where you're at today. And that's, there's a lot of churches that are out there and they're in the first 7 years part of that conversation, right? They're at that point, and who knows where God's taking them in the future. So, the thing I love about those, even your core values there, spiritual intensity, creative ideation, and leadership development, is there anything happening at your church these days that kind of brings all those to bear? That's obviously a loaded question. We know what we're going to talk about today, or at least I know, but is there anything happening that may be kind of bringing all those to bear for you, with particularly this pioneer campaign I've been hearing about coming out of 12 Stone?
Absolutely. It's either the biggest God-sized vision we've ever had, or the craziest thing we've ever done. And maybe, Rich, a little bit of both.
Yes.
But we are birthing 5 campuses. We're going to go from 4 campuses to 9 campuses on the weekend of January 11. And we've been in process for 18 to 24 months of really disciplined diligence preparing for this.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we think about the difference, my wife likes to say it this way, the difference between birthing one baby and birthing quintuplets, it's very difficult to compare.
Yes.
And even though I can't claim to what that feels like, I think I can almost say.
Yes. Wow.
So yeah, we're with God's help, we're going after birthing 5 at one time on one weekend.
On one weekend. Now, what were some of the factors that led you to that decision? So obviously, how long have you been multi-site, and how long have you been doing the campuses thing? And then what brought you to the point where that you kind of saw a bit of God's handprint to say, well, maybe this is the next step for us? Yeah.
Well, let's go back to your first question. Mm-hmm. We've been doing the multi-site since about 2008, maybe 2000, mm-hmm. actually 2007, I think. Mm-hmm. We launched our first one, which made us 2 campuses. Mm-hmm. Then we launched, that was Hamilton Mill. Then we launched Flowery Branch. That was our second. Then we launched our third. Actually, I'm saying them backwards because that's technically our 4th campus,
Right. Yeah.
Sugarloaf. But we began learning things along the way. We began discovering things along the way. Our nothing is like we planned or dreamed many, many years ago. Mm. We thought we would have a bunch of little McDonald's, little shops all over town with 350 seats or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we learned pretty quickly that was just way too small. It didn't work. We had leadership engines that could do more than that, but we also knew we didn't have the leadership engines to do, like a few multi-sites, they'll launch with 2,000. They want to launch with. It took us a long time to find out, to discover that we launched our zone, our fastball, is a room with about 750 chairs.
Okay.
800 chairs. And so we're building toward that, re-gearing everything except Central to that number of seats. So a lot of it was discovery, a lot of it was stewardship. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is what we learned from our 3rd campus. Mm-hmm. For example, that was the first one where we didn't go straight into a building.
Okay.
We went into a high school for 2 years first. Mm-hmm. Because of just the financial implications. So that's where that come from with the stewardship thing. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you want, we could jump from there to why 5 at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Why that? Yeah, that seems crazy.
It kind of does. It kind of does. And I think for us, there's 3 or maybe 4 thoughts behind that. Mm-hmm. The first one is, and this is kind of cool because these are all things bigger than we could have ever thought of. Mm-hmm. But momentum. The first answer is momentum. We've learned that it's possible in a large church environment, when you launch one campus, mm-hmm. they can almost be a bit of an outlier and hope it works. Go for it, boys.
Good luck.
Good luck out there. And of course that's not the vibe, but it could feel that way. Where mm-hmm. here, in contrast, when you launch 5, everybody's affected. Mm. Everybody's affected. 1,700 adults are leaving the current campuses.
Wow.
1,700. And that created this massive section of well over 1,000 roles where volunteers were, over 1,000 of those 1,700 were serving.
Wow.
So there's this sucking vacuum thing of a need for people to rise up. So there's an inspiration that comes from the momentum that no one's untouched. Mm. The second we talked about, but I'll go in a little more detail, is stewardship. Mm-hmm. We quickly discovered that we could launch 5 campuses for millions less dollars than we could build one.
Right.
I mean, millions.
Right.
And I started to talk about that a moment ago. That's why I switched to this other question. Mm-hmm. When we went to Sugarloaf, we went to the high school for 2 years to see, let's get some traction. Let's see if we could build this thing to 1,000 people or something, which we did before we moved into a building. Mm-hmm. And that worked, and that was good, and that obviously provided much more intelligent stewardship kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But in this learning, growing process, we've learned another layer is necessary. So we actually have a strategic design now as the result of 8 years of learning. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-phased thing. So phase 1 for all these campuses is mobile rental, just in and out, mobile church.
Right.
And 2 years, we don't know, 3 years, whatever, however, they'll all grow at different speeds. Then 3 to 5 years in a strip mall build out.
Okay.
And then build a building.
Standalone building.
Yeah. And so we've just learned that the debt, the money, the stuff, it's just, we need to do those phases. And it just, you know what? Maybe if we were smarter, we would have figured that out from day one.
Right.
It took us years to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is teamwork.
Right.
There's something really cool about watching these 5 campus pastors and 5 worship leaders and 5 children's and 5. They're so in it together.
Right.
They're so in it together. And then the last one, which really is the big one, but I hate to admit why I don't start with it. But I can tell you, because I really appreciate something you don't know I appreciate that you just did a moment ago. You started with the God factor. You started with the God vision. I appreciate that about you, Rich, because many times, to be really candid, I'll start with that answer if somebody's asking, and they go, yeah, I know, God, whatever, tell me what you guys. But that's the truth. Here's the truth. God told Kevin Myers to do that. And a couple of years ago at our 25th anniversary, we launched the vision of 5 campuses in 5 years, and that was God's voice to Kevin. And since that time in our prep, it has changed to, for the reasons I just told you, 5 campuses at one time.
Wow.
But I have to say, since God spoke to the senior pastor.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing. I think those are, kind of well-rounded. I can see that in a lot of churches, and in your church, obviously, what God's at work to make that happen. Let's dig into some of the specifics a little bit. So obviously, you're finding, I saw a number on your site. It's a huge number of volunteers you're having to mobilize. I think you said there's 1,700. So how have you gone about finding those volunteers? What does that kind of process look like, for you?
Yeah, but 1,700 adults are leaving.
Okay, right.
We're raising up a little over 1,200 maybe to replace the volunteers. We connected. This whole movement has been we've themed it the Pioneer, 5 pioneers, pioneer campuses, and so that we have the sending pioneers. The second phase was the step up. In other words, for those of you staying, you can't all leave. For those of you staying, who will step up to fill in the gap? And we did all the typical things and fun things, t-shirts, step up rallies and stuff. But that doesn't mean things work, right?
Right. Right.
But the people have been amazing, and God has moved, and we have been inundated with people rising up. And so we've cast a vision, we've communicated the need, we've told how many are leaving, we've told the people who we need, and they are literally stepping up and coming. And of course, as you know, as a pastor, there's a difference between sign up and show up.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've been blown away. The show up is a huge percentage of sign up. And they're already moving through training. And so the momentum is really gathered. But what I would say to you is, in a bigger answer, is this recruiting is really visionary recruiting. Now, was there a plan and gatherings and all kinds, t-shirts, all that stuff? Yeah. But really, it was attached to vision more than, wow, people are leaving, and now what are we going to do?
Right. Absolutely. Well, we're going through, we have 4 campuses, and we're eyeing more in the future. And, locations we're in the Northeast here in New Jersey. Locations are tough for us. We have a hard time finding rental locations. And to be honest, a part of this that takes my breath away is finding 5 locations. Can you give us kind of a bit of an insight into that? How's that process gone? What's that look like?
You know what? That was, if I started listing the problematic challenges, I would list that toward the top of the list of the absolutely unanticipated level of difficulty.
Okay.
It was hugely difficult. We're still, in this moment, fine tweaking some of our contracts and things. And then we began the process in a way probably everybody does. We kind of looked at a huge map and saw where are our people the most, where Where do we think God wants us to go? And, where are the population clusters of current 12 stoners? Where are growth sections? Where are the high schools and junior highs? The typical things you would do, like if you're going to plant a church.
Yep.
And we were, maybe I'll just own me, maybe I was a little naive on the bad side, full of faith on the other side, but thinking, there'll be dozens of high schools and middle schools, and not true.
Right.
We found that about a third of them weren't interested in having us there at all.
Right.
About a third of them already had a church.
Mm-hmm.
About a third of them either weren't big enough. It was just really complicated. And we did not anticipate one city didn't want us there.
Right.
They don't even want us there.
Right. Even if they have the space, they're not interested.
Yeah. And so we underestimated that, but God's helped us, and we have an amazing team, our logistics team. But we have been through dozens and dozens of buildings. So here's how I kept myself pumped up. If Rick Warren could do 54 buildings before he moved in, we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We're in a similar season in that we're really trying to flesh out future locations, and our team we're 400 and some odd facilities in on the research side for future campuses. Now that 400? We've tried, 400. And what we've done is we've cast a very wide net, and we're trying to cross off stuff that even at the beginning, we're like, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't work, but we want to actually go down the road of saying, we've talked to the people there. We know exactly how many people they can fit in their ballroom or in their auditorium. No, it won't work. Partly because we just want to know, right? It's like we want to be sure. We don't want to leave any stone unturned. So I can imagine that process was crazy to try to do that for 5. That's incredible. Now the campus pastor piece of this is significant. A lot of churches will say that's been their toughest nut, finding one for their next campus, let alone 5. Now you guys are a leadership development. That's one of your, prongs of your three-legged stool. So you must just have campus pastors lying around there just waiting. So I'm sure it's easy. But how did you find them?
Don't I wish?
Exactly.
It is true, and we that is who we are. And we have 25 residents, and they are phenomenal. And of course, most of them get hired by other really cool churches, but we get to hire. We do have the advantage to pick first,
Yes.
and if the timing works and we have an opening. So we do have a pipeline of phenomenal worship leaders and phenomenal young pastors, but the residents would not be commonly going right from the completion of a residency to campus pastor. More of them might go into student pastor or some other role first to get some more development.
Yep.
But to answer your question, currently, and I'll tell you why I'm using the word currently, 3 of our campus pastors were raised up from the pipeline. And 2 of them, we went outside within network with people that we knew really well. These guys, we had a really good sense of who they were, and I think God's hands on it because the 2 of them, both named Dan, Dan Mack and Dan Vanderwall, but both of them they're like family now. I mean, they the culture. I mean, so. Our preference, probably like you, Rich, is raise them up from inside because the cultural DNA transfers everything.
Big deal. Yep.
Big deal. But these 2 young men they're just us. We love them to death. They're in sharp. And of course, we're in the same process with worship leaders. We are more willing to have a worship leader. There's a little bit of a younger timeline there. Worship leader to come right out of our residency and go right into a
campus
if they're ready.
Yeah, right. If they're ready. Okay.
So, but you're right. It's a big deal to get the 5. I don't know if this is of interest to you, so I don't have to go on about it. But the reason I said currently, one of our 5th one, we actually don't have.
Okay.
And we have one of our guys who feels a call to senior pastor. Asked him to step in, and he's a church. I mean, he actually was one of our lead guys at Sugarloaf.
Oh, okay.
Very experienced, very good. He's out leading that 5th campus for many, many months if needed, while we go find the last one.
Find somebody. Now, that actually begs another question for me. How much of both on that front. So obviously you were able to declare we're going to this area without the final campus pastor nailed down. And then also the facility side, sounds like there were still a few balls in the air, but you had declared you're going to this community. There's a faith step there. Obviously, we're going to go in here. We don't have it all nailed down yet. Can you kind of talk through that? How did that work out? On both those dynamics?
Yeah, we were very open with the congregation. We actually, normally our style in the past is it's all locked and loaded and everything's done on the floor that we have. Mm-hmm. Here, we really just were very open and saying, here are the 9 areas that we're praying about. And the congregation sort of surveys and praying with us. Not that they're voting, but they're giving really massive input, because if they don't buy into this, it doesn't work.
Right.
If they don't go, it doesn't work. So they helped narrow it to the 5, and there was a combination of we're going, bold step of faith, bold step of if we need to be in a tent, we're going.
Right.
And I think when the congregation senses that boldness and that resolve, it's amazing what gets unlocked when you say we're going.
Right. Interesting.
We're doing this.
Right.
And then they come out of the woodwork. Sometimes somebody, I know somebody and they know somebody, and did you guys check that building and all that kind of stuff. So I think obviously we don't want to be foolish, but I think there was enough homework and preparation and prayer in advance that there wasn't anything foolish. So we needed boldness to say we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you obviously had earned the chips with people to do that. It's not like, your ministry has been, has been stable and well thought out and well planned. So, that's actually a great growth point for people to see, like, wow, okay, they are bringing us along in this, but that doesn't create mistrust or like, what are these people know what they're talking about? It's a kind of next logical step because you've built trust with your people.
Yeah.
As opposed to, if it was your first campus, that may not be the, the best decision on that. So,
and so the campus pastor thing is very important, but also, we've spent a long years now working on and learning. I think the number 2 thing. I mean, the number 1 thing by far, of course, is campus pastor, but not far underneath it, and then everything else pales. Everything else pales is centralizing. Where you are on the continuum of highly centralized or highly independent. And we have a lot of, at launch 1 and launch 2, we have no idea. I mean,
right.
we have no idea.
Right.
They're all entrepreneurial guys, go get them.
Right.
That doesn't, once you hit 4, that doesn't work anymore. And so we have massive amounts of energy into how do we define for us centralizing.
Interesting. So would you say as you've launched, you've actually become more centralized rather than decentralized?
By far more.
Interesting.
And some of the churches that started very almost Big Brother, they've maybe they were a 10 out of 10. They've maybe backed off to an 8.5. When we started more entrepreneurial, we were more in the 2 or 3. Like just guys go out there and go for it. We know you're us, so go do us, and we're good. We've learned that. I think that if a church has 2 or 3 campuses only, you can do that.
Yep.
From 4, and I don't know why 4 is magic, but Leadership Network and everybody on the planet has agreed 4 and up is a game changer. And if you aren't aligned and have systems and centralized, at least to some degree, agreed upon, that's why we call it 5.1. Is we want to stay as close as we can to who we think we are, a little more entrepreneurial. So for us, 5.1 is a way of keep it as close as we can to freedom and empowerment. Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was talking to a 14 campus church a couple weeks ago, and leader there said something I was like, wow, that I think is smart. They've gone both ways. So they started very centralized, went more decentralized, and actually have gone back to more centralized. And this leader, said something that I thought was really insightful. She said, they found that actually just that change of, kind of changing the pattern of work a little bit, they found helpful because it forces leaders to look at things a little bit different. It forces the central folks to think through campus stuff. It forces the campus people to think through centralization. I'm like, I think there's some wisdom there. And so she was saying like, hey, instead of seeing this as like a finished state, it's just this is where we are today. And, that may grow and change as we, look to the future. So I thought that's kind of an interesting point of view. So sorry, go ahead.
It is too. And I think one of the things that helps people relax in the centralizing thing, if they are resisting it, is that the majority of stuff is already centralized and nobody cares. Like IT is centralized, finance is centralized, building security. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's already centralized, and everybody goes, well, duh.
Yeah.
Really, the only thing we're talking about is the core set of ministries.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, campus pastors aren't fighting to do their own accounting.
No.
There's no one saying we want to do our own books. Nobody's saying that.
No one wants to do their own IT or their own. Yeah.
No, it's very true. All right. So what are you learning in this process? That's obviously a big question, but kind of here you are. This interview is a couple months out from launch. So what would you say are the kind of front burner things you're learning today?
Well, I think one of the things is we're learning more and more how to build while in flight. We use the word speed and pressure. We're at a flight path, a trajectory of whatever you want to call it, that no longer allows R&D to have like we'll go downtime R&D in the summer and we'll do our new deal, and it can never ever stop. And so we're actually learning a new skill at how to build things while we're up in the air flying. That's a new skill set for us, and we're getting it. We're figuring it out because it's different than slow it down. Let's park it for a minute. Let's figure this out. No, we're 30,000 feet. We're going 700 miles an hour.
Right.
We have to build these 5 while we're running the full. You know what I mean? And so
yeah, absolutely.
We're learning that.
Interesting.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think we're learning that. No matter how much we plan and anticipate, that we're going to encounter problems. We can't anticipate all the problems.
Nice.
And that requires like intense resilience and resolve. Because when you like locations, you're like, we got everybody dressed up and no place to go.
Right. Exactly.
That requires resolve.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Well, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close it up?
When it comes to multisite, I think I would say, please don't think of it like a program. Don't think of it like the cool thing I heard at a conference, because it's infinitely more difficult than one box.
Yeah. And
I would say, be sure that God's telling you to do this, and you feel like this is a vision. It's a true vision that you're owning, rather than this is the next cool thing that everybody's doing. Because the guys who are doing that, because it's an intelligent, cool thing to do, they're not doing so well. You've got to know this is what God wants you to do.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you being on the show today. If people want to get in touch with 12 Stone or with you, just kind of learn more about what you guys are up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Depending on what they're looking for, you can email me at dan.reiland@12stone.com. They can just go generically in and look at the staff and see who they want to talk to.
Nice.
We have a lot of resources. If they go up to our website, we have resources for church leaders, and they're all free. Everything is, we've invested quite a bit to give ourselves away. And so if church leaders want to cruise that site, I think they can find some cool stuff too. And yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate you being on the show. I'd love to have you back if you're open to it after launch, because I'd love to hear, what you've learned and, what it looked like actually post January 11th. So
I think that one could be the interesting interview. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that for sure. We'll wait a couple months, 2 or 3 months after, and then we'll hear that. I'd love to hear that. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
Have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out Unseminary Inbox. You can sign up at unseminary.com and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter @RichBirch or through email rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.